Hey Ashish, can you hear me?
Hey Shekar, I can hear you well. Can you hear me as well?
Yes, yes, man. How are you? How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
All well, all well. I hope the situation in Ukraine and Russia,
Yeah,
hope it does
it's
not escalate, right? Otherwise, all well.
yeah.
So
It's
Ashish,
actually a
yeah,
concerning
go
situation
ahead.
going on right now.
Yeah, correct. So Ashish, it's been really nice talking to you as always, right? So we've been catching up during office hours, etc. You've been
Yep.
part of our cohort. You were in
Six.
cohort 6, and you've been with the Upekkha community for now almost 2 years, or you've
That's
completed two
correct.
years.
That's correct. We have completed 2 years
And
now.
and Upekkha's funds have invested in you 100K.
Correct.
And how long has it been now? About is it a
About a
couple of
month,
months?
month and a half. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, month and a half, right?
It just
And
closed
we
end
did
of
that.
December.
Yeah, we did that in a typical Indivisi style model when we
Correct.
invested in you.
Correct.
So
Correct.
since you're part of the Upekkha community, the goal, the objective of this session is so that you can actually share your learnings and your experience, right, going through the value SaaS journey. So
Yeah.
maybe we'll start by having you introduce yourself and tell us what is the problem that you're trying to solve.
Sure.
How are you making this world a different place?
Great. Thank you so much for having me here, Shekhar, today. So Culturro, we basically are an HR tech company, and we're helping organizations to increase the lifetime value of employees. And it sounds like a simple term, which is lifetime value of employees. But when you start dissecting it, it has basically a lot of nuances built into it itself, right? So on one axis, when you look at the lifetime value of employees, it's basically talking about the employee performance, which is average performance for a single employee. But in totality, what is the overall performance that the organization is working at, right? When you take a sum total of all the outputs that people generate. The other axis of this particular metric is the tenure that people spend in companies, right? So how long are they able to spend their time with the organization, and before they call, hey, you know what, I need a change. So that's the sum total of what we are helping organizations with, and we are going through to solve this problem through a route of employee experience, which is the experiences that people get, because these are the experience that people get impacts either their performance or the tenure that they spend, or in cases both of them, right?
So how did you identify this opportunity? Was it
Very
from something that
funny.
you did in the past?
Yeah, so going back into my background, so I started my career as a software engineer. I did that for about 5 years before I moved on to the business side, became a strategy consultant, worked with Fortune 500 global companies, solving their strategic challenges. Just in my previous stint, prior to this, I was working with a boutique consulting firm, and we were helping private equity funds in the US to identify investment opportunities, and also helping their portfolio companies on strategic topics. So,
Good.
in entire experience that I had of roughly around 15 plus years before Culturo, I ended up working with organizations which had wonderful culture, Shikhar, and there were some experiences which were not so good, right? And combining those discussions that I had with my co-founders at that time when we were starting Culturo. Fortunately or unfortunately, we found ourselves in a very similar environment, which was not very conducive to employee productivity and employee tenure per se. And we used to do carpool together, and we used to rant a lot in terms of, hey, you know what, this is not good, that is not good. And those rant sessions basically ended up becoming brainstorming sessions, and those brainstorming sessions ended up becoming, a genesis for the idea of Culturo.
Got it. So if there are, see, because one of the things that SaaS founders or any entrepreneur, right,
Yeah,
needs to do is to try and figure out a problem,
correct,
whatever they're trying to solve is a
correct,
high value problem, right? So
absolutely.
what would your suggestion or recommendation be to aspiring founders in
Hmm.
terms of how should they go about finding this problem? See, in some cases, you would have faced that problem in your past,
Correct. Correct.
but what would you suggest to these founders?
See, largely, I think the secret to finding the high value problem is actually having worked in that industry or in that function for a while, right? If you have worked already in that function or industry, you already know how the processes work, how the different mechanics of that particular function or industry works. You know who the stakeholders are, you know who the vendors are, etc., etc. Right? Uh, that already brings a semblance of what a high value problem could be for you, right? But if in case you don't have it, for example, like in my case, I was not related to the HR field at all, right? But one of my co-founders was related in the HR field. But when I jumped into it personally, I said, hey, you know what? If I have to do something in this, I have to, become good at this particular function, for example, right? So I took active interest in, how the HR function works. So in the initial part of our journey, we actually didn't start right away with a product, right? So we said that, hey, for that, there are actually two reasons for that. We started on a consulting model. We said, hey, you know what? We are consultants. We know how to do consulting, right? Can we help other companies to create the right culture? Can we help other companies to create the right workplace experience, right? Those were the discussions that we said, hey, when we work with these companies, we would also learn in the process, right?
Okay.
And that was my learning curve as a founder, that initial 2.5 years that we put in into the consulting mode, I learned in and out of how the HR function works in India, globally, outside. What are the best practices? What works? What doesn't work? So I think that was my learning curve personally into the domain, and that gave me the foundation to be able to then say, hey, that this is a high value problem that we can actually productize now, right?
So would you also say that these founders, they should spend a lot of upfront time talking to potential customers,
Absolutely,
figuring out
absolutely,
the if their problem is high value, how much
correct.
impact it
How,
makes to the
what that
company?
value quantum is actually,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So if I look back at our initial days, right, we did not do a lot of things in the initial 90 days, or first 3 to 4 months actually. What we did was a couple of things. One was we tried to speak to as many people as possible
Yeah.
from the ecosystem. So be it investors, be it founders, because we were targeting the startup ecosystem at that particular point of time. So we said, hey, you know what, let's talk to the stakeholders first. How big the
Got it.
problem is? Are they actually willing to invest in this particular area or not? So we spoke to investors, we spoke to employees in a lot of cases, we spoke to founders, we spoke to HR heads also, to be able to understand that, hey, where is the problem? Where basically do they actually need help? The second thing that we did in the initial days was obviously our internal building as well. That, hey, if we are a company that is looking to build culture for other companies, how do we want to shape our culture? So all the building blocks, of our
Mm.
culture, also we started to put in place upfront right in the first few months of our existence.
Got it. So did you think about raising funds when you started your venture, and how did you go about meeting the capital requirement?
Hmm. So this was one thing that we were very clear that we don't want to raise funds right now. We
Okay.
wanted to bootstrap our way for as long as possible, and that is why that is one of the reasons why we started consulting as well, because consulting is immediate revenue, right? You don't need to build a product to be able to launch it and then get customers. So you can basically take a PowerPoint and go to a bunch of customers and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Would you like to invest in this? And actually, a few of our customers signed up in the first initial 3 to 4 months. So even
Okay.
before completing the first 3 months, we had a pilot for what we wanted to do.
Got it. Got it. So are you saying using that pilot you were able to meet some of the capital requirements, or what did you do in
Um,
terms of
I
capital
would not
requirements?
take that pilot as a capital requirement perspective, but that
Okay.
what it did is basically set a ball rolling for our operations. So whatever
Okay.
revenue that we were generating from a consulting practice, we were putting in for operations on an ongoing basis. Then, right?
Okay.
Uh, in totality, I would say that on the hindsight, if I look back, right, starting with zero capital is also not efficient, and starting with abundance of capital is also not efficient. You need to find a right balance that hey, this is the right balance that I need to do to reach my next milestone effectively, which is maybe for a starting company, for a new company, it's the MVP stage, right? So if you need
Got
to
it.
build an MVP, how much capital do we need? And you need to do that exercise well up front to be able to say that maybe I need $20,000. That's it, not more than that. And how am I
Got
going
it.
to generate those $20,000? Maybe I can do some consulting, or I can raise some friends and family round or something like that, right? And then
So
obviously
that
take it from milestone to milestone.
Yeah, interesting, because that brings me to the next question, right? So
Hmm.
if you look at the first 90 days of
Hmm.
your journey or any other entrepreneur journey,
Hmm. Hmm.
what do you see as the typical challenges that you face?
Right.
And yeah, what's your advice for aspiring founders?
So I would say that the initial 90 days is actually a challenge from a very different perspective in my personal experience. So first 90 days are actually a pretty hunky dory shaker, right? So
Okay.
you've left your job very recently and
Ah,
you start something new. It's very exciting, right?
okay.
Everything is smooth and because everything is new, right? You're finding something new or exciting every day, literally,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
True.
that can be a very exciting phase. But at the end of the day, what happens is that when you're not focusing on the basics of speaking to customers and keeping the focus in mind that hey, what is the next milestone do you want to hit? I think that initial planning is really important that founders need to do, and that's where I think we didn't do that perfectly well in the initial 90 days for sure, right? We did a lot of initiatives, we did a lot of work, but that was not well planned, I can say. It could have been
Got it.
planned better.
So in your early stage, did you have mentors? Did they help you with this? What would your advice
No.
be to founders on, say, finding mentors, or
Yeah.
what would your advice be on those? That-
Good question, Shikha. So we didn't have any mentors at that time, right? It was basically all our own understanding as founders, that we were reading about the ecosystem and reading about startups, how they work typically,
Okay,
reading books that hey, how do startups should operate in the initial days. That's basically what we're doing.
got it.
But on the hindsight, I can actually say that having an advisor who has done it millions or dozens of times and been there, done that. It could be either a founder who has been through that journey, or an advisor or a business thought process person who brings that business thought process can help a lot. Even though we had the business thought process already, but it was from a very different established company mindset, right? Which is very different from starting up. And how do you actually take your initial 6 months, for example, in a startup is very different from how you start a new project in a big cooperative.
Got it. So your priorities kept changing over time.
They did. They did. They did.
Okay. And did you wish that you had somebody to guide you during those
Absolutely.
when you were looking?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. And when you started your business,
Hmm.
was your aspiration to be global? Were you planning to sell in India, or were you planning to sell to? I know now you are a global business, but
Correct.
but what was your
So,
aspiration when you
yeah.
started?
I think at a very high level, we as a long-term vision, we wanted to be global for sure, right? We
Okay.
knew that our aspirations were definitely that hey, we want Culturo to be a global brand for sure, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But having started on a consulting note, global level consulting was a little out of reach for us, right? So we only focused on the Indian market to start with at the beginning. And in fact, probably that became a habit for us for a very long time until with the time we came to Upekkha, and then our perspective changed completely. That hey, you know what, you can actually sit in India and sell in the US as well. And
Okay.
those initial sprint discussions, I remember back in Feb 2020, just before the lockdown happened in Bangalore. That was basically kind of the turning point for us to start thinking that hey, you know what, maybe we don't need to focus on Indian market that much. But it depends. It totally depends on what problem are you solving and what is your ICP, what customers are you reaching out to. Maybe you are solving an India specific problem. So in that case, you have to concentrate on the India business. For us, it was a more global problem, and we could have easily looked at global landscape as well, which would have probably given us a better head start than what we got in this journey so far.
Got it. Got it. So, what was your experience finding the first customer?
Hmm.
Was it and or even the first few customers, right? The
Hmm.
first few 5 customers. What would was it a
Right.
very intense process? Was the sales cycle very long?
Hmm.
What can you share with others? That
Sure, sure. I think for the first customer, our sales cycle wasn't long because it was basically a very quick decision making because we reached out to a founder. He met us a couple of times. He liked what we were doing, and he gave us a pilot like within a month or month and a half, right? So that sales cycle was pretty short. But
Okay.
after
Okay.
that, the sales cycles became longer because we didn't have a repeatable sales process in place. We didn't have a
Okay.
proper marketing, marketing engine in place for us to constantly get leads that we can go after. I think that
Okay.
has been the hardest part for us to crack in terms of how do we put a repeatable sales process? How do we look at marketing as a proper engine? And that has been my learning, at least in the last 2 years. That hey, that this is an essential part that we need to crack. Otherwise, the sales cycles would always be longer, and then we would basically end up keep knocking doors which basically don't need to answer because they're not the right ICP for you in the end,
Got it. So how
which
was
was
that?
happening.
So how was that strategy shifted when you're beginning to win more customers now?
I think more clarity in terms of the ICP that we want to target,
Okay.
and when that clarity came in, we became more focused in terms of how do we want to crack that ICP. Right,
Got it.
all our
Got it.
efforts on sales and marketing became very focused. That hey, this is the ICP that we are going after. Then at least 80 to 90% of our energy should go in this direction.
Okay. Okay. So
Since
how many?
earlier there was no measurement, there was no focus of pinpointed energy, like you have
Sure.
light converging through a lens, right? That was not there, it was missing.
Got it. So what's your strategy or plans now to expand in global markets?
So yes, I think 2021 has been a good year for us. We basically grew 3x. 2022, we want to build on top of that as a success and continue our journey. So the idea is to get more global brands onto our portfolio. At least get 5 to 10 customers in the US, and then take it from there.
So has pandemic been a global been a driver for you for growth
See,
in global markets?
So pandemic has definitely been an angle because if you see in the pandemic, what happened is companies went remote suddenly, right?
Okay.
And the way of working changed immediately for people, and so it was definitely a driver in the sense that people needed more and more of the software that we were selling, the tool that we're selling, the product that we're selling, right? The problem that they're facing in terms of, and that problem got exacerbated during the pandemic for sure, right? Were we able to completely utilize that driver? Probably no. I think 2020 was the year when we were not able to completely capitalize because our foundation blocks were not in place properly,
I see.
right? In terms
Mm.
of how do we go concentratedly towards an ICP. So as an organization, we were not ready to capitalize on the tailwinds that were carrying us, right?
Got it.
But that started affecting, in 2021 when we had all the foundations in place in 2020, and then we started working very actively on in that direction. So 2021, the results basically were as a result of that foundation that we created in back in 2020.
Got it. Did you have to do anything with the pricing model, tweaking the pricing model to see any of these positive results? What would your advice on that be to the founders?
Yeah, right. So I think one thing that has not changed for us is actually the pricing, because we have always kept quite premium pricing from a value perspective. And that luckily came from my days as a consultant, that I knew that, hey, you know what, we actually need to price it more dependent on the value that the customers are generating rather than,
Yeah, I think
looking at.
you should elaborate on that because
Sure, I will do that.
most
I will
people
do that.
don't get that value-based pricing
I will
in
do
the
that.
first shot.
Right,
They
right.
iterate and
So,
then they learn, then they
got
get
it.
that right. Yeah.
Got it. So if I were to price, if I were to basically, when we started the product journey, and if I were to price our product vis-a-vis some of the competitors, we would have been selling at few cents a user a month, basically, because that's a competitive pricing currently in India that our competitors are selling at, right? I definitely didn't want to play that game, and all I started working backwards is that, hey, what is the ROI that we are generating for our customers, right? That was basically the starting block or the building block that we wanted to focus on. So if you go back to my initial discussion that I said that, hey, we are helping companies on employee lifetime value, right? So how do you calculate
Yeah.
employee lifetime value? Which is basically two axes. One is increase in employee performance, and second is increase in tenure, which is basically reduction in the attrition cost or the turnover cost that employees have, that the companies have, right? So whenever we approach a customer, we actually do a lot of research about them on the global platforms. For example, hey, how many employees do they have right now? how many X employees do they have right now, what could be the potential estimated attrition that they would be generating on an annual basis. And then looking at those formulas, the model that we have built, we are able to tangibilize or estimate a dollar value to an attrition cost, right? So if you take an
Got
example
it.
of a fast growing company in the US, let's say around 300 to 400 employees, right? And say that they have around 20% employee turnover on an annual level, their turnover cost could be as high as 2.5 to $3 million, right? Now, if
Got it.
I'm
Got
basically
it.
solving the $2.5 to $3 million problem, I don't want to charge them $100 a month, right? So that's
Yep.
where the thought
Makes
process
sense.
of pricing came in. That hey, how can we get a bigger chunk by showing the right ROI, by basically making sure that we are actually tangibilizing the returns that they're getting while they work at Culturro.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So when you have been selling to customers, what have you, your highest high and lowest low from
Hmm.
an experience point of view? What was that?
Highest high, I would say, was no doubt the first customer win. Right, I
Okay.
think that was the highest win for sure. The lowest low has been, see, obviously we have lost some customers during the process, during our journey as well. So that has always been a low, that okay, hey, you start to invest in a relationship with a customer, but sometimes unprecedented situations come in, either at their end or our end, due to which relationships don't continue. So I think those would be some of the lowest lows
Got it.
that would have happened, right?
Did you have customers reject in the first instance, say no to you, and then you continued to
Mhm.
break into them and
Every day.
close the
Every day. So yeah, I mean, initially I think the kind of problem that we are solving, because we are also competing with some of the global brands, so there are already some experiences of working with some of these companies that people have, right? So they compare us with those brands, and then we need to differentiate ourselves, that hey, this is how we're different from what you're using already, right? So that's the barrier that sometimes we need to crack. But what happens at the back is that when we're able to show them some ROI calculations, I think they become more receptive over a period of time. Then that's when it helps in terms of cracking some of that barrier that they would have built.
Got it. Got it. Nice. So let's just move to organization.
Hmm.
See, one of the things that we always talk about is, as founders, right? When before you start hiring your team,
Yep.
you tend to do a lot of things because
Yep.
you are pretty much generalist, trying to
Correct.
do everything that the company needs, right? Any
Correct.
advice
Correct.
on that in terms of where people should be focusing their energy? And do you think that people should just go keep lines of code, or they
Hmm.
should be focusing on customer conversations,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
should they be
Hmm.
trying to hire better people than themselves to
Yep.
make the job easy? You have any
Correct.
comments, thoughts on that?
Sure, absolutely. See, hiring is a balance that we need to crack, Shekhar, right? It's basically a balance between how many resources do you have and how much personal time do you have as a founder, and then what are the skills that you are missing as a founding team, right? Majorly, what needs to be done from a founder's perspective is that, especially being a single founder, I can very well relate to it. That I can say that as a founder, I pick a theme for every quarter that I want to solve, which basically is the biggest bottleneck that I have identified in the company so far, right? So personally, I put my time in that particular bottleneck. For the other things, I slowly build teams and give it to them. For example, in one quarter, let's say if I'm solving a tech challenge, right? So I'll put in my personal energy along with the tech team on that particular challenge, and then once it is solved, I will basically step away, and somebody else would continue doing that, right? Similarly, in other quarter, I would basically, let's say if we need to design a new sales campaign, and okay, sales campaign needs to be tweaked, etc. So then my focus would completely go on sales, and then I would basically get in, solve it, and come out of it, and then the teams would continue doing that. Over a period of time, what we realize is that, see, since we were bootstrapped, we started with a very young team, right? So all our team members were basically fresh out of college, and they started their careers with us. So there was a lot of training that we imparted on them in terms of how to get things done, etc., etc. Over a period
Got
of time, what we're doing is, one by one, we're bringing in some experienced person each of these functions to be able to take care of critical things, so that founder dependency reduces over a period of time, right? So the first
it.
area that we solved was operations. Now we have started solving for similarly in marketing. In the next quarter, we'll solve for sales. So on and so forth. For each and every quarter, we'll basically keep bringing in one particular person in who can, who would be a senior person to be able to take more of a charge of that particular function, so that I can step back from that function from a day-to-day perspective.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
Right? It's basically a fine line, fine balance that founders need to crack. But it's really important that founders know that what is your bottleneck right now, so that you can actually solve for that bottleneck rather than hiring for areas which are not your bottleneck at the moment.
Got it. So when did you move from being a generalist to specialist, or are you still a generalist?
I'm still a generalist. Right. So yeah, I mean,
So do you code now?
sorry.
Do
Oh
you
no, I
program?
don't code. I don't code
Okay.
now. So it's really funny because last I coded before Culturro was in 2009. So 2009 I coded, and then I went for my MBA and I stopped coding after that, right?
Okay.
And 2020 was the time. 2019 end was the time when I first coded again after 10 years. So it was a decade after that I picked up coding. So I
Okay.
coded for about a while, and it's only when the team gets stuck I used to jump in. That hey, if they were facing a challenge, because like I said, a lot of our team members were freshers, right? So they needed that hand holding and guidance. So I would just jump in when there were some critical pieces that needed to be solved, or they were stuck. But then I would come out of it. Now I don't code at all. So my team is really self-sufficient. They just do everything. In fact, I don't even get myself involved in deployments, etc. They're taking care of everything when it comes to tech, totally.
Great. That's nice. Very nice. So Ashish, if we were to rewind
Hmm,
entire journey,
hmm, hmm.
if there were three things that you would pick
Yep.
and say I would have done this differently, what would it be?
Okay. I think our initial phase, first of all, right? I think the way we started that, hey, we wanted to be completely bootstrap, probably was not the right way to go. We should have raised some small amount of capital upfront, right? Maybe
Oh,
from
you
our
guys
friends and
didn't.
family.
You guys not raised from angels or friends,
Nothing,
friends and
nothing,
family?
nothing, nothing. It was
Ah,
just basically blood and sweat that we put in, the initial very small capital that that is required to incorporate the company. That's it.
interesting.
Yeah.
So was
So
Upekkha funds
that was the
investment
first external money ever
first
to come in.
external
Yeah,
money ever?
that's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay,
So
please
imagine
continue.
that came out of 4 years of our existence.
Yeah, so please continue. Yeah.
So yes, I think that is something that should have happened earlier in our journey. And why that happened is that also because I think initially when we started, we were kind of rigid in our thought process that hey, we don't want to raise money, because we had heard a lot of horror stories about investors and predatory terms, etc., etc., and we didn't want to find ourselves into that mode, and we didn't want to lose our freedom as founders. Uh, on the company. But yeah, I mean, we didn't know that there are other ways of doing the same as well, right? Like we did with upfronts. But yeah, I think that was one of the things that we could have done differently for sure, right? Other thing that we could have done differently was our product journey. I think we could have done it before. We could have preponed it, and that's also connected with funds, because since we didn't have funds, we kind of postponed our product journey a bit. We could have easily fast tracked it by around a year or so initially, right?
Got it. Got it.
Um, and third, I think the biggest killer of all, which is founder alignment. I think that basically did hit us as well. So I think that again, we could have done it differently. We tried a lot, but yeah, I mean, somewhere down the line, sometimes things don't work out.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, yeah, that's true, right? Everything is not under our control, but you have to
Correct.
keep trying
You
your
have to keep
best.
trying. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ashish, yeah, let's in overall general, I want to talk about and understand your experience and journey through Peka,
Hmm.
right? So help me understand how the let's talk about two aspects, right? One is we have a very tight knit community.
Yep.
It's about 150 plus founders now,
Correct.
right? As part of the Upekkha community. So how are you finding working with the community? How has that been helpful to you? And the second part of the question is Upekkha journey itself in terms of the acceleration program, what we
Hmm.
stand for, the
Hmm.
value SaaS, right? What we stand
Yep.
for,
Yep.
building businesses in a capital efficient way,
Yep.
providing investment, in a manner where we help the founders keep that optionality until they decide that they want to go on a
Correct.
VC path. So I just
Correct.
want
Correct.
you to share some thoughts
Hmm.
so that it can benefit the
Sure.
any aspiring founder.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say that the value that Upekkha brought for us, in addition to all the guidance and mentorship, that was definitely valuable. But the biggest support system that I've found is actually in the tribe, Shikhar. For
Yeah,
me, that has been the biggest plus point, especially since the time I've been a single founder, right? Because that support system that I got from the community was awesome, right? I was basically, I was able to pick myself up again, and then, find people who I could be vulnerable with very openly, right? Which is
interesting.
very rare. Which is
Mm.
very rare, to find, in people outside your co-founders typically, right?
Got it.
So we have a very small knit community inside that large community as well, which is basically single founders community,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And what we do is we basically are connected to each other, and we know each other's business and lives in and out now, right? uh, to
Interesting.
the extent
Really?
that we actually connect on a daily basis, like multiple times a day also. That, hey, if I have a problem, if I have something in my thought, I'll just ping a couple of them, and check what they think about it, right? We have a weekly catch-up call
Oh,
scheduled with
that's really nice. Okay.
between them. So it's like, even having a call at 11:30. For example, last night itself, Vinay pinged me, hey, do you have a few minutes? And we spoke at 11:30 for about 45 minutes, right? So all those things, I
So
think,
this is a single
has
founder.
this is
Is this a single founder
single founders
community?
community. Correct, correct,
Oh, interesting. Okay, nice. Okay.
correct. So yeah, so I think, currently there are 5 people who are actively working in it. So it's Vishnu and Pawan, Salil, me, and Vinay. So 5 people are very actively working in that particular small community. I'm sure there would be other some similar smaller communities as well, here and there.
Got it. Got it. Nice. This is really nice. What was the experience from a value SaaS perspective?
Yeah.
Anything that
So I
you
think,
want to share?
from the time I first got to know about Upekkha, and I read, Upekkha's thought process for the first time on the website itself before we applied to Upekkha, I easily resonated with it because of the process that I explained to you earlier. That we always wanted to be a capital efficient business. We didn't want to burn a lot of money. We didn't want to, lose optionality. We didn't want to lose our choices as founders, right? So that thought process was already there, hence it clicked immediately that, hey, you know what, that's why Upekkha is the right founder, because that's what, that's where the wavelength is matching, basically, in your philosophy and in our value system, basically,
Got
right?
it. Mm.
So I think that selling didn't happen internally for us. We were already sold on the philosophy of value SaaS.
Okay.
The
Okay.
biggest learning was us, from a structure point of view. That, hey, how do you look at flywheel in a more structured manner, and how do you go from point A to point B of solving each and every step of that flywheel, one by one. Because if you don't have that visualization in front of you, that, hey, this is how the flywheel looks like, and this is how the customer flows from point A to point B, and this is how you recurringly make sure that, you have, top of the funnel to, managing churn. That structure in our thought process was not there earlier on. I
Got
think
it. Got it.
that was the biggest learning that we got through the sessions at Upekkha that we had. Then obviously the different sessions with guest speakers, plus also
Got it.
with other mentors from other tribes that had done and dusted, done with all those steps at many
Yeah.
times
So
during
so
during
top
their
so
journey.
top three impact for you specifically in your business,
Hmm.
and and even for you as an individual, right?
Hmm.
As a businessman, I would say as a
Yeah.
businessman, what would be the
Yeah.
top three or five things that you have been impacted with through your journey in
Structure, I think,
Upekkha?
the structure of the value SaaS flywheel, basically, I think that is the biggest discussion. And then understanding that each and every piece is critical, because earlier we were not focusing a lot on marketing, for example, right? And we made mistakes, even in our Upeka journey. I would say we didn't take marketing seriously. It's only in the
Okay.
last 3 to 6 months that we have started taking marketing seriously, right? So
Okay.
it's very natural, right? You make mistakes, you even hear about mistakes that others are doing, you still end up making those mistakes again sometimes. So
Got it.
I think that has been one of the journeys that we have gone through, which is basically making sure that we understand the flywheel properly, and then we focus on each and every piece of that flywheel in a proper manner, and that's where you start identifying those bottlenecks that I was talking about.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And any other specific impact through the journey for either you as an
Mentors and
individual?
tribe, I would say, basically it's the tribe and the mentors. So
Got it.
if I have anything in my mind, I know I can reach out to you, I can reach out to Rajan or Prasanna, right? You
Got it.
folks are accessible. I can reach out to any ex founders from the older cohorts on Slack, and pick their brains. So that basically gives a lot of comfort that, hey, you know what, you basically have people who have your back at
Got it.
every step of the
Got it.
journey.
So in general, when a new SaaS founder is
Hmm.
thinking about, say, joining this community, joining Upekkha's accelerator program,
Yep.
what kind of expectations should they have? Because sometimes I see that the founders, the SaaS founders, come in with the expectation that, hey, we'll be able to open doors for them in customers in the US or something like that, right?
Yeah,
So tell
that's a
me
mistake.
about, yeah, tell. It'll be good to understand, because from your experience,
Yeah,
what kind of expectations should these startup founders have? That is
sure.
one.
Got it.
And then I also want to touch upon from a funding perspective also, because there also that expectation that people
Yeah.
have in terms of funding. They may think
Hmm.
that we are ready to give them a lot of money, and we
Yeah,
believe in giving them a lot of money. So just
correct.
please, we want to hear
Sure.
your thoughts on that.
I'll do that. So, just remind me of your first question. I lost track.
The expectations that founders should
Expectations
have
are
coming
okay.
to the
Got it.
program,
Got it.
because
Got it.
sometimes, as I mentioned, right, sometimes people think that,
Yeah.
hey, once you come into Upekkha, we will be able to have 20
Right.
customers
Right.
opened for them, right? Or
Right.
something like that.
Correct. I think so. Somewhere down the line, we also had that expectation that, hey, Upekkha is actually embedded into the ecosystem, so they would be open. They would be able to open doors, which is not completely untrue. That okay, you folks can open doors, but it basically is not the end game to come to Upekkha, basically, right? Uh, if you want to come to Upekkha, I think for me the advice would be that, hey, come with an open mind of understanding how to build a SaaS business, basically, right? That may not be for your first company. Maybe your first company, you still work with Upekkha and you may not be successful, but you can take all those learnings in your second company, because you are going to start a second company after that, right?
Nice.
So I think
So are
come
you
with an
saying
open
that
mind.
you become a transformed
Yes,
business person?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So if I were to start a new company today, I would do it very, very differently than 5 years back that I did with
Got it.
Culturro,
Got it.
right? Because
Because that
a lot
again
of
boils down to the problem value, right? Because
absolutely problem value flywheel, and making sure that you're basically starting with the first thing of flywheel and then going through the end. That
yeah,
structure basically fastens or fastens your learning curve very rapidly, right?
got it. Got it.
So come with an open mind and come with a mind of accepting change. I think that is really critical, because if you don't come with that mindset, it's going to be a harder journey for you. You're going to take more time through that transition, because you, at the end of the day, to be able to crack it, you have to change, right? So the faster you change, the easier it's going to be in your journey. I think that's one advice that I would definitely give. So don't come with a closed mind, for sure.
Got it. Got it.
And yeah, the second question that you asked was about funding, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, see, funding for me is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself, right? You need funding to be able to solve your bottlenecks uh, majorly, right? If you think that, hey, you know what, to be able to solve this bottleneck and reach the next milestone, I don't have enough capital. That's when you need capital. Otherwise, you don't need capital. Okay,
Got it.
so get capital only that you need to be able to crack your next couple of milestones in the pipeline at the initial stage, right? Until you have achieved the entire flywheel from the top of the funnel to managing churn. I think if you haven't cracked that yet, you don't need growth money yet into the business.
Got it. Got it. So interesting. I will want to, I want to touch upon something that you mentioned, right, which is actually very important. And, irrespective of whether you become a great success with your first company or not, right, you become a transformed founder thinking of
Absolutely.
business in a different way. completely, I resonate that completely with you, right? And
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, but I think this is important for aspiring founders to also understand. Nilesh of Binri once said to us in a session, saying that it takes away actually 2 years is what he used, right? 2 years of learning
Easily.
time to
Easily.
think differently, because I
Yeah.
think that's where we want our program to help startup founders, is to once they come in with an open mind and have no biases or remove their biases. One of the
Correct.
things that we also want to do is make sure that they think of how to build a SaaS business
Correct.
in a right way, because there's a lot of
Correct.
learning that comes from the number of SaaS startup founders who have done this.
That's correct. That's
Some
correct.
who have struggled, some who have
Correct.
uh, not been successful the first time but done it the next time. So we
Absolutely
definitely,
correct.
that's something that we want to share, right? So that's definitely one of our focus.
Hmm.
The other thing also I want to touch upon on the funding is, because this is also important, right? People know that
Hmm.
is we we don't think of we consider this taking VC money versus not taking VC money, bootstrapping, as a false dichotomy.
It
It's
is
not that we
completely.
don't want people to take VC money, or we
That's right.
think that people should bootstrap, but we definitely think that people should build their business in a very capital and equity efficiently,
Correct.
right, in an efficient manner, so that
Correct.
they are not burning money
That's right.
before their foundation is all set in the business.
Absolutely.
And the
Absolutely.
other thing is, they don't burn equity,
Correct.
because they can always, their equity will be much more valuable if they are
Correct.
able to get that foundation right, right? So that's kind of what
That's
we
correct.
look at.
That's
So
correct.
I just wanted to emphasize that, and I wanted to hear your closing thoughts, Ashish, overall in general, right? Uh, with any other aspects that you want to share about your journey,
Hmm.
please do
Sure. No,
before
absolutely,
we.
Shekhar. I completely resonate with your thoughts. And in our philosophy, also, we're not opposed to VC money at all, right? It's just at what stage and what time that you get, what money into the company. I think that's the timing phase is really critical. And like you said, once you have built the foundation, that's when money can make a differentiator in your growth, right? But if you haven't cracked the foundation yet, money will not create that differentiator, or will not solve the problems that you're facing, basically,
Yeah,
right? So the initial phases of till the time you crack the values as flywheel, money will not solve a lot of your problems. It's only after that that money can be a differentiator in your growth,
got it.
right?
Anything else, Ashish, you want to add, or we can close this
Nothing from
session?
my side. We can.
So thank you so much, Ashish, for joining me in this talk. I,
Pleasure, Shekhar. Thank you for having me
I
here.
hope, yeah, I hope this benefits a lot of young entrepreneurs who
Yeah, and
want to build in the value size way, right? So that's kind of what we want.
absolutely. And whosoever is in the audience, if they feel like connecting with me, please feel free. I would be happy to, answer any specific questions that they may have about Upekkha or just starting up in general. Happy to. Thank you
Great.
for having me here, Shekhar. It was a pleasure
Thank you
speaking
so
with you.
much. Bye.
Thanks.